Welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Haydock, watch a Doctor Who story suggested by a friend of mine, and I drop in comments and observations, all the while trying to guess what my special guest's favourite thing about each episode might be.
Thank you, Toby, for asking me to come and speak to you about my favourite things regarding the Ark. My name's Mark Aldridge and I'm Associate Professor of Screen Histories at Solent University in Southampton, and obviously a big Doctor Who fan, as most people who love screen histories tend to be.
Well, hello everybody. I don't know about you, but I'm having a wonderful time reacquainting myself with the Ark, a Doctor Who story I've always found somewhat underrated. I wouldn't probably ever describe it as a classic, and yet I find that there are lots of things that are really fascinating and well rendered within the 4 episodes, and I think for its place in the show's history it is a programme of great ambition that of course could also be boiled down to men in awkward alien costumes shuffling about and doing what I think going into this, the feeling of a lot of the viewers or of the feedback or just of general fan consensus might be a not very well executed fight sequence, although a lot of it is on film, so we may come to reconsider that. It's certainly very impressive in the book, and a reminder that the book of the Ark, written by Paul Erickson, who did do the screenplay at a time when there were some very good Hartnell Doctor Who books coming out that just sort of broadened the scope a little bit and found the authors doing more than just putting he said, she said after the dialogue in the scripts. And it is a very intelligent book, and it's got the bookend of Russell Kane's dad, who comes back at the end in the book. So that shrinking that happens to him at the beginning actually has an arc, which it seems odd now to have had that shrinking, which just seems to be there to have an effect. Now, this is a story full of great effects, but to bring that character back at the end, I mean, it would make it a speaking part and an actor that you'd have to keep available. And in those days, if you wanted an actor in episode 1 of something, in episode 4 of something, you know, there was there were things that were done in terms of sometimes, you know, you'd have to sort of pay to retain people or whatever, or make sure that they're available or book in advance, which you tend not to do now. They tend just to assume that you will say yes, and if you don't, they tend to just assume, or because you're expendable, basically, they'll go, we'll book you now and we will need you in the future and you'll just have to be available, and you kind of have to lump it. Anyway, let's not get into that, but yes, the book is very good, apart from the fact that because I think he was quite bored of saying he said, she said, Paul Erickson does make Stephen ejaculate quite a lot. That's my overwhelming memory of the book, but I haven't read it for many years, but still haven't forgotten the sheer torrent of ejaculations. Anyway, let us hear what everyone has to say. So I've, in response to my viewing of episode 3 of the Ark, and the listeners in Patreonville have also had the fortune of hearing my interview with John Halstead, who is the voice of Monoids 2 and 3. So Monoid 2 last episode and 3 this episode, I think. And John, an extremely colourful character who gives a very funny, camp, full of swearing, full of indiscretion interview, which will be made available to the outside world, but has been made available to patrons in between episodes 3 and 4, and I'd forgotten just what a brilliant interview it was. Good old John, and he's not interviewed on the DVD, and in fact there's no public interview with John Halstead about his time on Doctor Who, and what a career he's had. He was a regular in Emergency Ward 10. He's even been in Top Boy, the Channel 4 urban drug drama of more recent years, as well as being a panto dame and all sorts of other stuff. What a fella. Anyway, let us see what everyone has to say about episode 3 of the Ark and anticipating episode 4. As I say, I seem to think people did conjure up the idea of the fight scene that we're about to see as being not particularly good, but I seem to recall, as I say, lots of film, lots of monoids. So that's what I'm going to go into this episode with half an eye on, which makes me in the kingdom of the monoids. Anyway, Nick Jocelyn Mellish says, one advantage with watching Doctor Who in broadcast order is getting to see just how bizarre it can be. The idea that this, with its security kitchens, flashy potatoes and boys' own adventure bombs in statues, comes straight after The Massacre is baffling. It makes the tonal leap between seasons 23 and 24 look perfectly normal. Well, yes, indeed, but this is why I like season 3, Nick, because I think it does sort of stretch what the show could do, and I think this is good quality sci-fi in places. And then you have the ambition of the Celestial Toymaker. You have which I don't think is great in execution, but I think in terms of ambition of what the show can do and its parameters, and the Massacre, which I think is excellent quality historical drama, and it has the science fiction twist of the Doctor, but it's just good television, really, The Massacre. Anyway, Nick Mellish says that Frank. So I think it's a very interesting period in the show, and that Doctor Who's strength is in its, in its ability to be a different show from one week to the next, whilst keeping those core things of being entertaining and intelligent and also, fun. I did wonder, says Frank Shales, if the nothing stupid aliens were a deliberate attempt to make the series more kid-friendly after the incomprehensible to kids but marvellous to adults political intrigues of The Massacre. Well, yes, and that's the thing, and I haven't done The Massacre for this yet, but I love The Massacre, but I wonder if I would have done when I was old enough, if I'd been watching it at the time as the target audience. And I have to be honest and go, I might well not have been. And that's always something to bear in mind as we watch as adults, that Doctor Who's prime directive, if you like, is to at least be to entertain the kids first and foremost. Now, if it can sneak in stuff for the adults as well, or do something absolutely for the adults but still somehow be accessible to the kids, that is fine. Yeah, interesting. Whereas I think the Monoids and the Ark antics are definitely kid-friendly, but the script gives us other things to think about, and the production is, very very ambitious. David Gillespie Pratt says the cliffhanger between parts 2 and 3 is brilliant. There's a line of dialogue from the Doctor in the script just after they land where he says they've only travelled through the time barrier, which was dropped, and a good move as it risks giving the game away ahead of the cliffhanger. David said he would go and sneak a little look at the camera scripts. Thanks for that insight, David. That would have made the cliffhanger very different kettle of fish. Episode 4 is a fascinating production, being one of the first, or is it the first, episodes recorded out of sequence. Yeah, I think you're right, David. It's a technically complex episode in an already complex story. It's really like no other story of the era. This is what I mean, David. This is why I like it. David adds, I've also found the Have I Got News For You clip that was mentioned last edition. Have a list where we talked about Stephen succumbing to the plague being used in Have I Got News For You to mock Peter Purvis's performance. My memory cheated, says David, on which clip they used, but the sneering is present and correct. I might share it, but I don't want to trigger any angry reactions. Oh, I'd like to see that, David. I think you're sharing in order to show the beastliness of the Have I Got Newsers. Used to be appointment viewing for me, but I've gone off it a bit recently. Well, no, I haven't gone off it. I just don't find the desire to watch it, whereas I used to tape it. Anyway, this is just a sign of how fractured our digestion of various media are, isn't it? I don't watch terrestrial television at all, really. Anyway, let's not get distracted by that. Who knows how they will be watching television in the 57th segment of Time. But Adam Parkin, in the first segment of Time, says the discussion of various sausage rolls, I was banging on about sausage rolls last time, makes me want one, though not a disgusting train station one, as eaten by Richard Beale the Refusian. I'm curious what people think of food from pills when it comes to dietary choices, so excluding requirements like allergies and intolerances. We don't know how they're manufactured, manufactured or what is used, but potentially could chicken from pills contain no product from a living chicken and be vegetarian or even vegan? Now that is fascinating, and certainly something that's given us food for thought, because we're definitely veggie in this house, and I think we'd like to go the whole hog, or no, as far away from the whole hog as is possible. And but not because of a dislike of meat, although actually over the past 40 years or so, I would probably. In fact, I found a couple of the pretend, the meat substitutes that are actually closer to the living thing, actually not as palatable as I thought they would be. Whereas, 20, 30 years ago, if you'd given me something that was absolutely like meat, I'd have been absolutely delighted, because I didn't stop eating it because of the taste. But anyway, there is an interesting ethical argument, discussion to be had about that, Adam, is does it count as meat if it's not been created from meat, or if it's been reconstituted from, Frank Shales, I did wonder if Toby's non-roll sausage roll influences attention to the non-potato potatoes. It might well have done, for those of you that had the fortune of not listening to it last week. I did have a sausage roll that was neither roll nor sausage. Jason Thompson, who is quite scientific, I seem to recall, comes in and says, I think the answer to that question would come down to semantics. It would certainly be possible to manufacture something that looks, feels and tastes like chicken. Meat substitutes are already a thing, after all. It's a question of identifying what gives it the specific flavour, which we can already do. See how many meat-flavoured crisps are suitable for vegetarians. Well, indeed, beef flavouring in crisps is just onion, isn't it? And texture that we identify as chicken, and turning that into a pill that magically becomes something very like a chicken fillet. The question then becomes, is it actually chicken if it never came from the bird? Would there be trading standards in the future insisting the pill could only be called chicken if it was made from the bird meat in the first place, and just made into a pill for ease of storage, preservation and transport? I can envisage the legal challenges being more complex than the technical ones for such a thing. Now that's a very interesting point, and I wonder if there's a lot of paperwork if they get the potato pills out of a box that has all sorts of forms they have to fill in, and then when it's presented at the table, say just have a sticker on it that says contains no actual potato. Interesting stuff. And that's what you'd do if you wrote a novel now about a sort of space place where you had all of this funky technology. You would, wouldn't you? You could have quite a lot of fun looking at the administrative and legal ramifications of the space pills. Jason comes back in with his own subject. Oh, yes, because Jason had suggested the Oscars for actors for season 3 and had not mentioned Kevin Stoney, who would have been my choice for best guest actor. How could I have forgotten Kevin Stoney in my season 3 Oscar nominations, he says, especially his Masterplan is my favourite Hartnell story. Fair point too about Ivor Salter struggling through some of his lines, but if Hartnell can do it, why not the guest actors, eh? I think Monoid 2 definitely gets the most useless baddie award, though, so we're definitely on the same page there. And Frank Shales comes in and says, yes, I mean, I know Hartnell's not over his line, but I would also argue that, Hartnell was beginning to struggle with his lines through illness, whereas I think Ivor Salter struggled with his lines because he was perhaps living a bilious lifestyle. Anyway, Frank, because he doesn't really know his lines in the Space Museum either. To be in one Doctor Who story where you don't really know your lines is unfortunate, but to be in 2. I think in the commentary for the Space Museum, I think Maureen actually says that's an actor in trouble. Anyway, Frank Shale says, there's another barely remarked visual effect, which I only noticed when someone pointed it out to me. When the Refusion is seated and chatting in the castle, you can see an electronic zigzag wobble applied to the area just above the chair, as if to indicate some energy field around the invisible body. Perhaps this was done by using an inlay signal of some kind. It's more obvious on the DVD than the VHS tape. Michael Imeson put his heart and soul into the direction. I can see why he was hacked off at the BBC letting him go. I think he's still around. Michael Imeson, is indeed still around. And I mean, barely remarked, Frank. I mean, I take it you haven't listened to the commentary on the DVD in which I remark upon it to the director. But I cannot actually take credit because I had at that point only seen it on VHS and definitely not picked up, and I never had fancy tellies or anything. But Peter Crocker, when he was doing the remastering, said, I think there's something going on there. I think they've applied some kind of visual effect to suggest, the space being like a heat haze, the space being slightly compromised in its makeup. But the atmosphere is slightly jiggered about by the presence of the bodiless refusions. So that really is, and I mentioned it to Imerson and he couldn't remember, which is a shame because I was hoping that sometimes happens with moments where you go, oh, brilliant, I'm going to keep this to myself and I'm going to mention it during the commentary, and they're going to go, I'm so glad you noticed, or, oh yes, of course, I'd totally forgotten that, yes, we did this, and it didn't get either response. It just got not sure. And then I immediately lost confidence in it. I think that's how it goes anyway. I haven't listened to the commentary and it was about 15 years ago. David Gillespie Pratt says, I've seen this mentioned. I think again by me, I hope. And looking at the scene, there is something going on with the picture. I've looked at the camera script and it doesn't specify any effects in this scene. All of the other inlay effects are detailed, but there's definitely something happening with the picture around the chair on that shot before someone yanks the chair back. Yes, indeed. Maybe just luck then, but it looks intriguing and therefore great, says Frank. And John Hall comes in. Yes, Michael Imerson is still with us. He celebrated his 90th birthday on the 9th of February. So happy birthday, Michael. And yes, well done, folks, for bringing that up, because I was talking about the chair. I had meant to mention the visual effect, but I forgot because I was too carried away by the chair. And actually, I've just gone back to look at it, and it does. Unless you know what you're looking for. It's the scene where it's before the chair goes back. It's when they're in sort of profile. It's not so visible, and bear in mind I'm watching on a laptop on iPlayer. On the scene that's the sort of close up where it's just the chair. It's much more visible when Hartnell's talking and the Refusion guy is on the left hand side of the screen. Jason Thompson says, "Oh, and yay for mention of the tripods." Did I mention the tripods? I mean, it was less than a week ago and I can't remember. That series is among my earliest. Oh, because Richard Beale is in it. My earliest Richard Beale, voice of the Refusions. That series is amongst my earliest TV memories, and those towering metal machines and their green one-eyed alien operators implanted themselves firmly in my mind to the point I still sometimes have nightmares involving them. It shares quite a few credited cast with Doctor Who as well, including Ivor Salter, as it happens, who pops up in one episode as a baker, in addition to Richard Beale, whom you already mentioned, such names as Jeremy Young, Pamela Salem, yes, they were the French aristocrats in it, weren't they? John Woodvine playing the Master, not the Master, the alien Master, Edward Highmore from Planet of Fire, and many others can be found. Again, this is something I did a thread about on Twitter. Frank Shales adds, reading the book about the making of the tripods, I was delighted to see Richard Bates's involvement, as I'm both an Avengers fan and recently watched Love for Lydia, a 1977 TV adaptation of his father's novel, which he helped set up, and which gave a breakthrough role to a certain young fellow called Peter Davison. It's also nice he's on the Mac Hulk documentary on the new Blu-ray collection. Bates, not Davison. Yes, well, I'd had the pleasure of speaking to Richard Bates when I wrote Don Lever's obituary for The Guardian, and I was in a hotel in Birmingham doing terrible Christmas gigs, and I got tired to do that job, and I spoke to Don Lever's widow, and she gave me Richard Bates's number, and I spoke to him, and it's a thing that's sort of laid in my memory, and I forgot when I spoke to Richard Bates, he produced the tripods, and blah, blah, blah. And anyway, when we got to doing the Malcolm Hulk thing, Chris Chapman said, yes, is Richard Bates still around? I said, yes, he is, and I've got his number, and he'd moved house about 3 times, and actually Chris had to do a completely new search for him, but off we went, and visited him, and had a great time, because he's a really interesting guy, and it was very hospitable and a very good interviewee, so that was all nice, and it's great to actually be in the presence of a TV legend. Robbie Carnegie, and for those who may not get the context, Richard Bates is related to H.E. Bates, who wrote The Darling Buds of May, but he worked on The Avengers and The Tripods and lots of other great telly. Robbie Carnegie says, I'm completely new to the Ark. While I watched Doctor Who religiously from Tom Baker onwards and have since since watched most of Pertwee, my knowledge of the Hartnell era remains very patchy. This is why this podcast plays such a great role in encouraging me to watch these episodes. Oh, well, that's nice, Robbie. I liked the space opera B-movie quality of this story. It almost felt like the Doctor turning up in an episode of Star Trek. I was drawn to the parallels with the Ark and the Ark in Space, not just the titles, in that both feature the Doctor and companions going away from the Ark and returning sometime later, in the latter case, of course, for Revenge of the Sidemen. Yes, that's very true, isn't it? If you go to an Ark, you bounce back. That hadn't occurred to me. Also, having not read the cast list, when the Monoids began speaking, I thought, is that Roy Skelton? Such recognisable tones. Also, on the evidence of this one, I like Dodo. Well, this is good. I'm pleased with the Dodo love. And as I say, I'm much more receptive to her than I was when I was a cross teenager. Jack Sharp says, I tried to watch these episodes, but then there was a galaxy accident, which may be the perfect example of early Doctor Who just cramming in lazy sci-fi words without really knowing what they mean. Honestly, I'm not sure why they have the security kitchen. They should take them to the corridor. It'd be much easier to guard them there. That's a good reference to the enemy of the world there, Jack. Yes, galaxy accident as well. And of course, what in space is it or whatever it was. Matt Foy says, the room called Tim, this was me gassing on about the fact we've got a room in our house called Tim, has a pleasing Monty Python aspect to it. I hope you told the builders, as well as all subsequent visitors to Haydock Towers. There are some who call it Tim. Less daft than Monoid too. Yes, I should stand outside Tim, shouldn't I, and asking people to riddle me ree. Shane Play says, yes, you definitely get the point for episode 1. Thank you, Shane. Yes, so those keeping score, in that case, do we say I got the points for episodes 1 and 2, didn't get the point for episode 3. So at the moment I'm in the lead, and I only need to get one of the 2 things Mark chooses for this episode, his favourite thing of episode 4, and a bonus favourite thing that can be for any episode or any aspect of the programme. And I'll win, which I rarely do. I won with Love and Monsters, I won with the Censorites. I think that might be about it. In other news, the Monoids seem more like humanoid vegetables than reptiles to me, like a big eggplant waddling around with a mop top and a big cyclopean eye. Marauding veggie beetles from Dimension X. Now, you don't get titles like that in Doctor Who, and I'm not sure I'm happy about that. That's a great title. That would be the title of the Doctor Who annual version. Marauding veggie beetles from Dimension X. Love it. That's it. That's all I've got this time around. Well, I think that is superb. Isn't the Ark also Serial X? Because I think the Ark's production code might be X. In which case, that's a really good title, because it actually ties in with the with the title. In fact, I'm gonna look now. Doctor Who. I hate it when people do this, but I just wanna, because if I'm right, I'm gonna look really cool, and if I'm wrong, I should own it. So I'm not running to the internet to do that boring check in real time like lots of people do on podcasts that annoy me. I'm just not going to speculate further until I get confirmation. And I typed it into Google, and it says the Ark in Space has the production code 4C. Yeah, all right. No, the Ark is production code X. I still got it. Oh, my brain might be atrophying, but I can still do a production. I've never claimed to be able to do a production code, but I wouldn't list it on my skills. But it means I'm quite glad, therefore, when I do get one. Anyway, yeah, so not only Dimension X, Shane, but Production Code X. Chris Williams says, if I remember rightly, the Ark was first repeated on UK Gold on Christmas Day in 1992, and what a present it was. Being an obscure story not regarded fondly or even talked about much, I was surprised to see how ambitious and epic it was in its ideas and design. The size of that control room. You can't usually swing a cat, and now they're driving cars around it. So I've always had a soft spot for it since. If anyone to read the story as the oppressed become worse than the oppressors if you give them a chance, because I referred to the fact that some have found the depiction of the Monoids seizing control as being slightly problematic, then I'd send them back to episode 1. On hearing about intruders on the ship, the commander discreetly says to Zentos, "It's nothing to do with the Monoids, is it?" There's clearly a bit of institutional racism going on amongst the Guardians. Plus, they don't really panic until a human dies after quite a few Monoids have. Their intolerance is touched on in episode 4, but it's a pity they don't explore it more. Episodes 3 and 4 could have been Planet of the Apes 3 years early. Yes, indeed, and especially as there is a lot of fighting in this episode. A bit more introspection and attention paid to the themes might have been more welcome. On a more serious note, those Monoids can seriously put away a lot of space claret, space chicken wings, and space new potatoes. But considering they don't have mouths, you have to wonder where they're actually putting it. But they do. I mean, they don't hide from that, do they? Well, they do hide because they show Monoid 1 being given something to eat, but then you don't see where he puts it. But the suggestion is then that he has eaten it. So their mouths are obviously in their folds of skin or behind their translators or somewhere. They've obviously got well hidden mouths. Richard Bignell, the illustrious Richard Bignell. Doctor Who researcher extraordinaire comes in and says, "My first memory of the Monoids came in the very first Doctor Who holiday special, produced by Polystyle in 1973, in a 2-page photo feature entitled The Enemies of Doctor Who. Among the recently seen Daleks and Ogrons, Alpha Centauri and the Sea Devils was a photo of Monoids 1 and 3 from this episode, pointing their guns towards the camera. Their weirdness really intrigued me, and the image burned itself into my brain. I do wonder, though, how the Monoids managed to consume all this food and drink that's being served to them. You're not the only one, Richard. Chris thought that too. It's good to know, though, that 10 million years' time, we'll still be eating space chicken wings and space new potatoes. You're the second person that's referred to space chicken wings as space new potatoes. I would argue that they weren't new potatoes. They were actually just potatoes, but let's not get into that. It's good to remember that Brian Wright, playing Dasek, is the same Brian Wright who was later commissioned to write a storyline called The Mists of Madness for John Pertwee's first season. Yes, that's true, so he could have been one of those rare people who's been in and written for Doctor Who, but it never came to pass. David Gillespie Pratt. Thanks, Richard. Nice to hear from Richard. David Gillespie Pratt says, I took the How in Space Did You Do It, said by Brian Wright, to be a replacement for How on Earth. How on Earth? How in space? Yes, I think that makes sense, David, seeing as the Earth is no more. I think that's the intention, even if it doesn't quite come off. I think that's a good speculation there, David. And there's an even better use for space in Galaxy 4. Marga saying how soldiers are no good for space work. Yes, that's very true. Oh, space. John Hall pops in and says, Toby, all this talk of kitchens has me wondering, what is your favourite kitchen from Classic Who? The security kitchen from this story, say. B, Mrs. Wiggs' kitchen from The Celestial Toymaker. C, Mrs. Farrell's CSO kitchen from Terror of the Autons. Or D, the candy kitchen from The Happiness Patrol. Or is there another one that catches your fancy more, like the Fetch Priory kitchen where scientists breezily trade quips over breakfast and Mrs. Tyler presumably cashes her sweets? Well, I would say, John Hall, that there's also the one in The Enemy of the World where Griffin the Chef hides under the table and it's very funny. I love Griffin the Chef. But I like all the ones you mention. I think it would be cruel to choose one kitchen over another because they all have their own charms. The security kitchen, obviously, just by the fact that it's the security kitchen. Mrs. Wiggs's kitchen has a sort of fairy tale delight about it, although I might reject that one on the grounds that it takes place in one of the worst. It is the centre of the action of one of the worst Doctor Who episodes of all time. Mrs. Farrell's CSO kitchen from Terror of the Autons is legendary. And in fact, there's a forum I go on sometimes where one of the users is called Mrs. Farrell's CSO kitchen, which I think is very witty. And I love the candy kitchen. I love the design of it and the vibes there. I think from reading them back, I think it's probably though a toss up between the security kitchen and Mrs. Farrell's CSO kitchen. They're both legends in very different ways. And John Hall comes back to add, the Monoid who wilts under Dodo's interrogation deserves the award for wettest, weediest Doctor Who baddie. That's Monoid 2 to you and me, John. And John adds, yes, nearly forgot, Professor Kerensky was wrong. It wasn't the Jaggeroth who needed all the chickens. It was the human guardians in the security kitchen who needed them to feed their Monoid overlords. Well, yes, indeed. But I think maybe the Jaggeroth and the Monoids are sort of related because they're both green and scaly with one eye. Rob Davidson says, "Ooh, the Ark is a strange beast. A story in two halves in more ways than one, as there's a real tonal shift between parts 1 and 2 and parts 3 and 4. But for the presence of the Doctor, Stephen and Dodo, the first half feels more like an episode of Out of the Unknown, with its high-concept storyline and unusually heightened acting style, and Paul Erickson did dramatise something for Out of the Unknown. Then, in the second part, we're firmly in very basic Who territory, with shuffling rubber monsters and a clumsy shootout. Hartnell's fussy grandfatherly Doctor already feels a bit out of place in the Wiles-Toss vision of the series, and it does feel like a change is needed. Not that his performance is lacking in any way. The first Doctor just doesn't quite fit the same way that he did in seasons 1 and 2. It's very interesting, Rob, and I think that's right. It's all a bit. It's strange. It does feel like a show in a state of sort of development or changing directions, which of course we don't know which direction it would have fully gone in, because Wiles leaves and Tosh goes with him, and then Innes Lloyd comes in with his own very firm ideas, which are very different from what we've had. So I think there's always a lot of what might have been about season 3, and I think a bit like season 7 I love as a season, but I don't think the Pertwee era could have prospered if it had all been like that, even though I might have liked that. But maybe I like season 7 more because there is only one season 7, and I feel a bit like that with season 3. The fact that season 3 exists and as it is in the vast mosaic that is Doctor Who, I think is wonderful and interesting and beguiling and strange and compelling. But if it had carried on in that direction, would it have survived? I don't know that it had. I think Innes Lloyd's more down to earth and sort of prosaic and straightforward kind of storytelling, and placing it firmly, actually making it more like a lot of shows, was kind of what it needed after it had emerged from its initial first flush of success, and then it had this strange interloper in John Wiles wanting to sort of do quite thoughtful and strange things with it. I think it probably needed the steadier but perhaps less interesting vision of Innes Lloyd. And Innes Lloyd, I'm not denigrating him here because he produces some great Doctor Who stories, but I think what he does is much more straightforward, and maybe that's what the show needed. But I do like the ambition of season 3, whilst acknowledging that maybe the show wouldn't have prospered if it had carried on in that fashion. And Susie Ferguson, if you don't know Susie, if you're not if you only listen to the odd one of these, Susie is somebody who's come to Doctor Who to classic Doctor Who relatively late, and is embracing watching stories she's never seen before, and occasionally apologises for that, and we always tell her that she must not, because hers is as treasured a voice as anybody's, and her perspective as somebody that's not seen some of this stuff is often fascinating. So Susie says, "Hello Susie, not surprising I'm sure, but this is my first time watching the Ark. I love how Happy Times and Places helps me decide where to jump in with classic Who. I really enjoyed it. Love the time jump aspect. It's one of my favourite time travel tropes, and I really want to see more of these companions, even if Dodo's use of the English language is so uncouth. This isn't the show's fault, but sadly I cannot take the Monoids seriously thanks to their uncanny resemblance to Skipper the Eye-Child in Garth Marenghi's Dark Place." Well, there we go, Susie, and you're the first person to invoke Skipper the Eye-Child in Garth Marenghi's Dark Place in Happy Times and Places, so that's a good place to be. Thanks for Susie. And it's funny, isn't it? I don't see it with the Monoids being rubbish. I think they're great. They look fantastic to me, and yet there's a little piece of my brain that goes, but yeah, I can see why people think they're. No, I can't say, but I have to accept that in some people's eyes they don't look terribly convincing. But for some reason, they're never distracting to me in the way that a lot of other Doctor Who's two monsters are. I love that, and because they're in black and white as well, I think they're great. But yes, they have got Beatles wigs and shuffly legs and eyes in their mouths. But I just kind of like them. Anyway, we. The way that our brain interprets images is not the way that everybody's does, and even within us, I say our brain, as in Doctor Who fans, but it's only a subset. It must be a very small subset of Doctor Who fans who interpret the Monoids generously, shall we say, and I'm one of them, and I'm fine with that. But I would not condemn anybody who struggles with them. So, anyway, we only have to struggle with them for one more episode, for 25 more minutes, for in fact 24 minutes and 43 seconds, as we press play on episode 4 of the Ark. Oh, folks, it's the bomb. 3, 2, 1. So, and talking of the Monoids, I did mention, didn't I, Frank George and Edmund Coulter, who are the two main Monoid actors, are people we didn't know anything about at all. I then at least got a picture of Edmund Coulter from Spotlight, so I knew what he looked like, and then turned out he'd been in America. He died actually only within the last decade or so, but by then it was, obviously by then it was too late to track him down, as it were. But I don't know if we ever would have done until we found out he died. But anyway, he was one that we missed, but who was around. And so here we are. They are. When I was watching the scene back on Refusis to have a look at the zigzag effect, I have to say I listened again to the Refusians' explanation of who they were, and them having no physical form and all of that. And I thought it was really compelling and weird. The sci-fi was pleasantly weird. The idea that they've had this galaxy accident, they don't have form, so they'd quite like people to use their planet because otherwise it'd be a bit of a waste. It's a bit like when somebody's wife dies or something, they say, well, I got it because at least it meant there was some life in the building, and it's so essentially human race is the Refusians' dogs. I think the Monoid actors have worked on their body language as well. They're not just. I think Edmund Coulter does rather a good job here with his. He does a bit of a Hartnell, doesn't he? Monoid one. He sort of holds his lapel, and maybe Hartnell had said to him, "Now, like he said to Purvis, now, young man, make sure you do all your hand movements up near your face so that the camera can capture it, because he is." Yeah, so Monoid 3 is John Halstead, who's taken over from doing the voice of Monoid 2, which he did in episode 2. And one of them, Roy or John, is doing Monoid 4. I think it's probably John, but I don't know. A word of warning, and I see I'd forgotten this. They slide their, like the Cybermen open their letterboxes when they're talking. The Monoids sort of have these little slides in the circles on their neck garments to show who's talking and so who isn't. So maybe that's where their mouth is. That behind their, albeit movable, neck things, that's their mouth open. It's their mouth opening, or it's just a. It's the equivalent of the Silurian's third eye flashing to basically say, viewer, this is the one who's talking. You can do that with that, or you can do that by wobbling your head. They've done it by sliding a thing, which is quaint but silly, but it's okay. Now I'm gonna be keeping an eye out for zigzag for the whole of this now, but I wonder if that's difficult to do here because it was a moving camera. Hello, Dodo. What do we think of you? This is your first story, isn't it? And I do take the point that somebody made earlier on, not this episode, about actually she's not, because I'd said about the physicality, she's like Susan and Vicky. But no, in the casting of Jackie Lane is an attempt to make a sort of more tomboyish 60s, working class, which is immediately lost with the lack of the regional accent, because in those days working class meant from the north. And I do think it's a shame we lose that, and it just goes to show how conservative, in a way, television could be, to the extent that it said, well, no, a northern accent's a bit much for a children's program, for a lead in a children's program. she's got a lovely voice and a lovely dignity about her, Eileen Helsby. I think she's a good actress. Right, whenever he talks about Maharis, which is a very good name, I think there was an American actor, wasn't there, called George Maharis. But you don't get any other Maharises in Doctor Who. It's a good name. There he is, Terence Woodfield, who I've forgotten to mention. He did write to my friend Ben Jolly, who managed to get replies from lots of actors before I was thinking of writing to them. And thanks for the Monoid 3 is giving some great exposition here. Careful, because in case you've forgotten, because we mentioned it last in episode 1, see, there we are. That's potato. That looks like a roast potato. It's been roast since it was reconstituted. But yeah, he's clearly sucked the chicken off the bones there, and he's drunk that wine. So they do have mouths. Yes. He's just moving his circle back and forward now. But I think I think they need the hair, actually, and I think that makes them. And they don't look like. It doesn't look like Beatles to me, the Beatles, aka from The Chase, because they're actually huge and they're yak hair, aren't they? I think they're just because we think because it's the 60s and we go, oh, that's a 60s haircut, but we're not watching it in the 60s, and none of the humans in this story have that haircut. So I think they, within the confines of the 57th segment in time, it's not a 57th segment in time haircut. But yes, Terence Woodfield, Maharis, here he is. He sent my friend Ben Jolly a letter, and Ben said, and in the, I'm sure in the book, it's Baku now who opens the door, or Baku who sneaks out. And we've never met Baku before. And it's not explained, whereas Baku is in episode 2. I've always wondered why he changed Baku from episode 3 to episode from one one set of 700 years to the other. But it doesn't matter. He was just repurposing the name. Anyway, but he doesn't introduce the character in the book. It doesn't matter. Anyway, nice action for Dasuk. You can see he's looking a bit sweaty on the cheek there, can't you? I've been watching Callan recently, and my goodness. Because there's a lot of action in it and it's quite intense, you see the actors sort of sweating in real time. And Edward Woodward will be in one scene, with a bead of sweat on his cheek, and then there's another scene that's the end of the show that's like a week later as they're having the debrief, and he's still got the sweat that he had in the previous scene because he hadn't had time to wipe it off. Terence Woodfield. I take a long time to get to the end of an anecdote, don't I? Here's Monoid 4. Who's speaking? And Monoid 4 is John Caesar. Just to delay that anecdote a bit more, it's not worth it. John Caesar is John Caesar. I got a little bit confused by, because there was a Johnny Caesar as well. I think is a different person, but John Caesar is the guy who shoots the chief sea devil in episode 6 of the Sea Devils, and he's a man in the market in the Roman. So he's one of those actors that sort of pops up but never doing anything particularly vital, but would have been an interesting chap to chat to. And for ages I thought John Caesar and Johnny Caesar might be the same person, but they're actually not. I think John Caesar died some time ago. I think Johnny Caesar was in Emmerdale, and he's certainly in Our Friends in the North, but he's a different person. He's the one who's never been in Doctor Who. Anyway, does not matter. Our John Caesar, our Doctor Who John Caesar, was another of those that I don't think ever gave an interview. And if he'd just played one of those parts, one episode of the Romans, one episode of the Ark, one episode of the Sea Devils, might not have been a tantalising prospect, but all three together, he might have had an anecdote from each story. But anyway, he's the rather, and I don't think he's got that big rib cage and stomach in his other two stories, so I think he's slightly padded as Monoid 4. Anyway, here's Terence Woodfield as Maharis, who died, I think, on the same day as the other actor that played Salation in the Daleks' Master Plan, Ian East, who played him when he was a non-speaking character. But Terence Woodfield, who knew Margot Hayhoe, and Margot did put us in touch, but Terence never replied to me. He did reply to Ben Jolly, and Ben said, and Lee Allen, and one of them, I think it might have been Lee actually said to me, but Ben or Lee, when when the envelope was opened, you could smell the cigarette, the tobacco coming forth from it. So I think Terence was so maybe that's why Salation speaks the way he does. But anyway, he was still a committed smoker towards the end of his life. But yes, I'd have liked to have had a chat with Terence. I always wonder what those actors do whose last credit is in the sort of early 80s and they're still around in 2015. And you go, so what have you been doing since? I've got a feeling, I'm not sure Terence wasn't of good stock and therefore maybe didn't need to do anything. But look, here we have a set that has a real sense of size again, and I think Barry Newbury deserves a lot of credit. But I love the way that Imeson shoots it as well, having the Doctor and Dodo in the foreground, and seeing that he's a bit more less effort has been put into his voice, isn't it? Yes, okay. So Monoid 4 is the rebellious one. I think I put in my write-up on the Patreon that John Halstead voices the rebellious Monoid 3. I'd got my Monoids mixed up. I think in the book they don't do 1, 2, 3, and 4. I think they bring different numbered Monoids into it as if to suggest they don't start doing that the Monoids who do the most interesting things come in numerical order. So if we have a scene with Monoid 75, it's going to be really boring, and he's not going to have an opinion either way. It's going to be a very equivocating Monoid. Oh yes, I like this subplot about the bomb. So here's the inlay. Oh, now did you see there? Now if that was Caves of Androzani, we'd have loved that because it was somebody walking round the image. But that image is of course supposed to be on that screen, and those two guardians that walked past it, they chopped the tops of their hair off. Because obviously the inlay is in front of the picture, but where the Doctor's face in the screen is supposed to be behind those people. To be fair, I hadn't noticed that before, and I've seen this episode a few times. But obviously, I'm looking for stuff now, and attention has been brought to the inlay effect because it was postulated that it might be the first effect of its kind in an earlier comment, and we had a big chat about inlay and CSO on one of the earlier installments of this. But yes, so I noticed sadly the tops of people's heads getting cut off there, which is not as egregious as some similar effects issues in things like The Chase, but nonetheless that wasn't 100% successful. So there's Monoid 63, who's got a very big eye. He's got a thyroid problem. His eye's massive. Love that shot. Look at that. Force perspective. You've got a model, but you've got the Monoid standing up in the background. Thank you, Michael Imeson, for going to the trouble to give us the geography, to pull off that ambitious shot. Well done. I love it. And I'd love to say Monoid 63 was probably impressed, but at number 63, he's not going to be impressed or anything. He's not going to have any opinion at all. I love the fact we've got Monoids 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 63. I wonder if that's a reference to the fact that Doctor Who started in 1963. I absolutely doubt it, but I'm sure there's a whole chapter in some god-awful book about that being a fact. Oh, I don't know. I haven't seen one. Oh, Doctor Who, you cunning old devil. I love that. And the Doctor is being entirely truthful. That's the sort of thing that I think as a kid, it's a funny joke as an adult, but as a kid, it would make you go, oh my God, he said he hasn't seen one because they're invisible. That's amazing. I mean, not that kids in the 1960s would have spoken like modern youth. I do like the attempts to show that the Monoids don't all think the same, that we insult them by going, because Doctor Who is full of races where all the people on this planet are very warlike, all the people on this planet are very timid. You would never say about all the people on the planet Earth are one thing or another, because we find different behavior patterns even within cultures, so and they all look the same, or they all have the same attitude, is quite a reductive way at looking at a species or a nationality or whatever. So even though you have the slave race element of the monoids and all of that, there is an attempt here to make them have different views. And I actually think Monoid 1 has quite a lot of character. He's sarky, he's quite patronising, he's a bit full of himself, and I think Edmund Coulter gives him a sort of body language that suggests that he's quite high on his own power, and Roy Skelton clearly enjoys playing him. So it's almost a shame they decide to call them 1, 2, 3, and 4. If they'd called them, Monoid Jim, Monoid Trevor, well, call them that, but Monoid, but then you get into space names, which can be tricky. But actually, then some of the names are quite cool here. I think Maharis is a good name. Yendam, Dasek, they're not bad. Venusa, it's like Vanessa, isn't it? But slightly spacey. She doesn't. Because you could do that line, you no longer belong to us, let him go with the landing party. She could be really spiteful and dismissive, but actually she does it with empathy. So I think that's quite a nice acting choice for her to have made. I think he's very shiny, Brian, right there. He does look like his son. If you look up the actor Philip Wright, you can definitely see where they come from, that they come from the same stock. Ben Jolly, I think, was certainly the person that put me in touch with Brian. Oh yeah, and I think that's a cutaway. Yes, it is. So he's gone to the effort there of just ending the scene by going, because we're used to continuous recording, so we're used to scenes ending with people just all walking off, or everybody walking off, leading one person looking thoughtful who then goes the other way. But he's gone to the effort of going, I would bet money that's a separate setup where he does the close-up of Venusa just going, yeah, all right, I'm going to end the scene on this sort of nod of affirmation and walk away to show the statue in the background. That's thoughtful. It helps with the storytelling because we know that the bomb is in the statue, but it's also a really good visual. So it's Imeson being imaginative, but not just for the sake of it looking good. It's all about the storytelling as well. And look at this. This is great. This is a massive jungle set with loads of monsters in it. What is not? If I'd been a kid in the 60s, that would have been like that. When you're quite often used to, even if there are a lot of monsters, they're all sort of slightly squashed together. You've got these monsters on film in a jungle. I think it's absolutely terrific. But yeah, would it have been better if he'd given them names? Oh, and they're quite sort of forlorn, the screams, aren't they? But also it is quite difficult for them to point their guns and shoot. Okay, I maybe give you that. But then again, it's quite hard for the Daleks and K9 and all sorts of others. So anyway, but and I like the way that they sort of blend into because the fact that they've got these wigs on as well, and bits of the jungle are quite sort of hairy or frundy. It means there's a sort of slightly camouflaged element to them as well. But look at that. You've got a whole spaceship and a full-length monoid right there in the back of the shot. And then you've got a spaceship landing in close-up. Oh, yes, please. Gorgeous visuals. Thank you very much, Michael Imeson. You've given us another perspective shot. Oh, and here we are on film. This spaceship's on film. And Maharis, having sort of been a little bit helpful, once a Quisling, always a Quisling, and he, bless him, rather sweetly, he still rather stupidly thinks the Monoids are, going to look after him because he's looked after them. But of course, we humans all look the same to them, which, frankly, I don't think is a comment on the Monoids being simplistic. I think it's a reversal of the sort of attitude they kind of had to us. One Monoid's pretty much like another, one human's pretty much like another, which is why they shoot the guy that's been their servant. Although it's interesting to note that therefore the first bit Terence Woodfield did as Maharis was to die. So he was dead first. Often in acting, the first thing you have to do is, be in bed with somebody you met that morning, and then you do the scenes where you meet a couple of weeks later. Whereas, Terence Woodfield had to do the scene where he died first. And he's not the first Katerina. Adriana Hill had to do that. But yeah, I think the fight scene there is not that bad at all. And that's the end, isn't it? So that's the death of Monoid 1. I do like the fact that Monoid 4 sort of wipes his brow as if to say, "Oh, I've had enough of this," and then throws his gun down. I mean, yeah, we could have got a bit more psychology into the Monoids, I suppose. But do you want lots of scenes of them sort of talking and grappling their necklace holes? I don't think that fight is as bad as I think some people say. I don't think it's badly staged. You get a lot of Monoids. It's the fact that they haven't got as much character as the humans, but that speaks to the fact that that's really well done as well. This suggesting that it's the invisible creature, although that woman doesn't know where to look, the invisible creature coming through them in order to lift the thing up. That's really well done. It's a POV, but it's I don't know, it has a sort of grandeur about it more so than some of the Dalek POV or other POV stuff that we've seen in the show. It felt like an awesome creature sort of sweeping through, and then they mixed it with this model, and I've always thought this was clever, that clearly what they've done is they've picked it up from the bottom here, and you go, well, we're going to see the hand, but now, of course, what they do is the hand that is now holding the head, they've swapped it. At this point, I think this is the handover point, so that you can actually see the whole of the bottom come through the picture. Again, you could have sold that without showing it from top to bottom, go past the frame. But Michael Imeson's gone, I think people will guess that it's just being held from the bottom. So let's prove to them that it isn't. So he's aware of the viewer's expectations and takeoff from this, and so therefore wants to thwart those in order to make an impression, and to show that that this is stuff that's being really thought about. And we have this lovely model, and of course this stuff has all been set up because we've already seen the things being ejected into space, the dead bodies, which one throws forward to the similar thing in Planet of Evil, but two is a nice idea, and we don't often have funerals or ideas of how do you dispose of things in Doctor Who, so that was all a nice touch anyway. The fact that it comes in use to the denouement of the story is superb. And then we have the sort of moral message. The Doctor says, yeah, we accepted responsibility for their welfare and we treated them like slaves. Yeah, so I don't think it's saying, oh, if you're nice to the natives, they'll treat you like crap. It's actually, if you treat them like crap, they'll strive for something better. So I think we impose our own unease with our colonial past on it, which is no bad thing to do, but I don't actually think that's what the story is driving at, and I don't think it is unconsciously missing that in an embarrassing way either. I think it's an attempt, albeit a simplistic children's television attempt, to say there should be understanding between species, we should be nice to each other. He's being a bit saucy here, isn't he? Our children or our children's children, and he's going, by the way, that means I'm going to get jiggy with you, Venusa, and you're almost, both of us are almost naked anyway. Do they hold hands here, or have I just read that into it? Oh, do you know what? I thought there was a little bit. Leo and Tanya Lernov do that in Wheel in Space, don't they, where there's a little bit of hand-holding goes on. But, oh, no, do we cut back to them now? No. Well, I've decided, much like I have with Ian and Barbara, that Dasuk and Venusa get married, even though actually a friend of mine has had a letter in Doctor Who magazine this month saying he doesn't like, romance being put onto every single character in Doctor Who, and there's much more of that in New Doctor Who than Old Doctor Who. And I don't want to get sidetracked by that now. I might do an indefinable magic about Hanky Panky and the TARDIS, but I'm going to allow it for Venusa and Dasuk. I think there'll be nothing wrong with them. Although you would worry that a Refusion might be having a little bit of an eavesdrop, wouldn't you? You'd never be able to escape the fact that somebody might be watching. And here we have, this is a great effect as well. I mean, you can sort of see how it's done because you can see where the screen has been slightly masked off or whatever. But of course, I like the fact that it well done, and they're both following where he's going. That of course the fact that he's invisible in the Celestial Toy Maker ties in with the Refusions, even though it turns out to be a completely different thing. But it is a nice, I always kind of like it in the Hartnell era where it feels like an adventure in space and time, i.e. everything is sort of happening. I mean, it stretches credulity a little bit, and it's much more sensible to have separate stories. But I do also... Oh, Tony Lego, he was Paddy Russell's other half for a long time. Anyway, always tried to get Howard King, never did. Ray Angel, I think that's a great name for a sound engineer. Wonder if he's related to Nick Angel. So there we go, and I like anything. I like the close-up of the TARDIS, and the final time Michael Imerson's name appeared as a director on anything, and I think he should be very proud of that production because I think it was superb and a fine example of Doctor Who. I get that people identify various shortcomings within this story. I get it, but I forgive them because I think that it has ambition and it has lots to think about, and in its own way it does a lot of things that other Doctor Who doesn't do, and they to me draw me much more than the sort of criticisms we might make about its sort of B-movie style or its slightly naive phraseology or the aspects that we often take for granted in Doctor Who, of really a few standout performances helping to cover the cracks. We don't really have that here, but the characters don't really ask for it either. I think it would have been it's almost a waste of a really strong actor to play some of those parts, which is a shortcoming of the writing, that the characters are a bit thin. But I think it would be mad to have got a big name to play. Well, maybe Zentos could have benefited from having even just somebody from the RSC. But anyway, I think if you were going to have a story where you didn't spend a lot of money on actors, I think that was probably a good one. I'd actually like to go to the production file and see if the actors got paid vastly differently from some other stories. Certainly in other stories you would have had a main guest star who was over £100, or at least in the 90s, per episode, and I would be surprised if there was anybody over sort of 50 or 60 for this, which is a big saving at the end of the day, because actors are often among the most expensive parts of a production, because Doctor Who and 60s television relied on actors. That's the thing you see on screen. That's the thing that isn't going to sort of fray at the seams if you get good ones. The onus on actors was much stronger than on production values, and they were the best chance your script had if the actors made it sound sweet. Anyway, I need to choose two favourite things before I open up to Mark Aldridge. So, a thing from episode 4, I mean, annoyingly, he's mentioned that forced perspective shot, which I definitely would have chosen. I think that's amazing, and there's two of them, but he kind of mentioned that. So, do I have another? I mean, I like the model going all the way up and us seeing its head and the base of it. I like that camera move of the Refusion going through the crowd. I like that shot of Venusa. All that effort to do that sort of cutaway or whatever it is, to have the close up of her, for her to move away, for the statue to be in the background. But they're all examples of Michael Imeson going above and beyond the call of duty in order to present this story in a visually compelling way. But the visuals are always there to drive the story. I've got to emphasise that. It's not fur coat and no knickers. The knickers are pulled up to the belly button. They're not knickers. They're boxer shorts, or whatever the lady calls it. That's not. Anyway, you knew where I was going with that. But we've chosen Imeson. We've chosen the visual flair and imagination from because it's been apparent from episode 1. I'd sort of like to choose the Monoids because I do rather like them. I think their voices are rather fun, even though there's a Zippy-esque quality. But even that is kind of charming. And you take Zippy out of existence and you wouldn't think there was anything wrong with those voices. The fact that it has that association that makes it slightly comical makes it charming. It doesn't take away from the story, but on their own terms, I think they're good voices. And as I say, I think Monoid 1 has quite a lot of characterization. He's arrogant and he's vainglorious and he's conniving and he's sarky. I do like the Monoids. Can I like the Monoids? I do like the Doctor's line, "I haven't seen one." I think that's a really important moment because, as I say, I love those bits where it's something that seems so clever if you're a kid, and you look at it as an adult and go, well, no, I can see where that's come from and that's fine. But as a kid, I know that that's exactly the sort of thing that I'd have gone, oh, I know what he's done there. That's amazing. His Doctor Who's been so clever. He's outwitted them. And as an adult, it's not one of those bits that's kid-friendly that now looks to us a bit naive, which other bits of Doctor Who can definitely do. As an adult, you just go, oh yeah, that's quite fun. So I do like that, oh, I haven't seen one, because it shows, the Doctor's character, especially as the Doctor doesn't have an awful lot to do with the denouement, really. He does phone through and say, the statue, there's a bomb and all of that, but they already kind of know that, and it's the Refusion that does the heavy lifting, and the Monoids kill each other really rather handily. That's never a trope I'm wild about, but seeing as it happened every time in 24 where they needed to introduce a baddie, so he'd come in and kill the earlier baddie. But I never really like it when baddies bump each other off. I think that's a bit of a cheat. And especially, with that battle where you don't really know who is who. I mean, that final Monoid getting shot is Monoid 1, isn't it, when he's on the floor? And so he does get a kind of death scene, but I think you have to, unless you're looking closely, you go, oh, that must have been Monoid 1. Anyway. So do I? Because I think my overall thing, I'm gonna do, because of the story, because Michael Imeson recorded the episode out of order. I'm going to do my bonus thing. I'm going to choose Barry Newbury, the designer, because I think the sets that he provides are fantastic. You've got the painted bits, you've got the forced perspective, he's got two different jungles, and they are two distinct and different jungles that do a different job. But the sheer size as well, and the inventive way that they're done, and the way that he seems to rise to the occasion to do what Michael Imeson needed him to do, and aid him in the storytelling, I think is all really, really good and strong. So my bonus thing is the design by Barry Newbury, particularly for its size. And as I say, one of our correspondents noted, you don't just walk through this set, you can drive a car through it, or a BBC scenery shifter's tank trolley. But yeah, I mean, and for Doctor Who, I think that's, refreshing, and must have seemed like, it's competing with the size and ambition of the American stuff that people were starting to see, and that's no bad thing to keep you on your toes and go, well, we can't just stick a couple of extra eyebrows on people and have them walk rather slowly around the same corridor shot from different angles. So do I choose the Monoids, who I think there's a lot of them? Do you know what I mean? I think as a kid, yeah, damn it, I'm with. He's going to choose. It's because, see, I always worry when I'm close. It's almost better when I have no chance of victory, because then I always fluff it at the important juncture. I do like Hartnell saying, well, I haven't seen one, and he does it really, really well, and he's very funny. Do I like that? Do I go for that, or do I go for the Monoids? I mean, would Mark have chosen the Monoids by now? Because he could choose them as his bonus bit. It doesn't matter. I still get the point. It doesn't matter where we apply them. Yeah, I'm going to choose the Monoids because they have had a lot of stick. But I cannot pretend I don't like them. As I say, I can understand why they don't work for other people, yet for some reason the combination of performance and design, and the design is a combination of stuck together legs, that make them shuffle, the eye in the mouth, and the what we call the Beatles wig. But for me, none of those things puncture the reality in the way that some monster designs don't quite work. I think they're much better than some of the monster designs in the 80s even. I think maybe they're helped by the fact that they're in black and white. But I think they've... And actually, I think it's quite fun as a kid to go, oh, I think they've put the eye in the mouth. But they still look like one-eyed creatures. They don't look like creatures with eyes where their mouth should be, because they're given height by the hair. The hair helps. The Beatles haircut helps. And I quite like the fact that they go, no, we're going to show that they eat, but we're not going to show you where they eat. So we're answering your questions without... Now, we can't give you an actual answer because they don't have mouths, but we're going, well, no, it is there. You just got to work it out, but it's definitely there. And I think, again, that is ambitious and thoughtful, and it's tenacious. It plays with the audience rather tenaciously. Tenacious is definitely a word for Imeson, as well as, you know, the visual ambition and the invention. There's a slight sort of attitude there as well that I think is sort of brave and exciting and fun, and it's got a little bit, you know, spunkiness to it. So yes, the Monoids are my thing for episode 4. And the bonus thing is Baron Newbury's design. But I'm prepared to take them the other way around. Let us see what Mark Aldridge has to say. I think he's done a bonus and a thing for episode 4. Has he done them separately? Yeah, so we've got 4 and we've got extra favourite thing from Mark Aldridge. So let us go for number 4 first. What is going to be his favourite thing from episode 4?
And then episode 4, well, I can't get to the end and not say that obviously one of the best things about the arc is the Monoids.
Yes!
I'm going to extend it a little bit and say, how about alien life generally? Because I'm going to include the Refusians, which I struggle to say. But then too, like there's... I love their fruity voices, which just about all of the guest cast have in this story as well, by the way. Especially sort of Captain Guy in the first 2 episodes is just one of the campest performances I've seen in Doctor Who. And that is really saying something. But yeah, he's really going for it. And the Refusians, pretty much the same. I love their sort of booming voices. I also love that there is a scene where... William Hartnell is sat across a table with an apparently empty chair opposite. And if you look closely, you can see that they have actually inlaid a very faint sort of wibbly wobbly shape. So they've, again, Michael Emerson going to further lengths than he needed to, really doing more than he had to do. And we see this all the way through the story, the lovely aerial shots and everything that gives it all such a lovely sense of space. But yeah, the Monoids and the aliens is what I really love about this. So the Monoids, of course, are absolutely ridiculous. There is no getting away from it. It's obvious that they've just got ping pong balls in their mouths. They've got those ridiculous wigs. They flap. They can't walk. And yet I love them because where else are you going to get that sort of thing? That they've really gone for it. Like, there's no reining back, which I think you can sometimes get in maybe more recent Doctor Who, where there's always this concern that people might laugh at it. And I certainly don't think they were worrying about that too much with the Monoids. Little glimpses of their lives, obviously the security kitchen, which everybody loves. But I love the fact there's a little hint of when the Monoid's eating a piece of fruit and he sort of turns away and puts it under his neck flap, I think. There don't seem to be any female Monoids, although maybe, I don't know, maybe we don't want to go down that route too much. But that's a little bit of a shame. They've all got these big tummies as well. I don't know whether that's casting or padding. I think probably the latter. And yeah, so I just absolutely love that they are proper, fully formed, bonkers aliens in Doctor Who. And that's what I really, really like to see. So yes, that's my choice for the final episode, is the Monoids.
I've only gone on bloody one. I won the censor rights. I won Love and Monsters. I won the Monoids. What that says to me is I have an aptitude for victory on stories that people don't really like that much, particularly odd Hartnell sci-fi strange ones. I've won. It doesn't matter what he chooses for his bonus thing. I've got 3 out of 4, even though, you know, I specified Monoids and he brought the Refusians into it, which I think is quite right. He too noticed the zigzag, and it's a shame you don't see it on all of the shots, but they were having a bash. Maybe they gave up, maybe it didn't work, whatever. There's definitely an attempt there to do something. I would say that I think Richard Beale has a fruitier voice than the rest of the cast, which is why he does the monoid, the Refusian voice, because Richard Beale had a very distinctive, deep voice, and you could recognise it even when he was in his 90s. I remember being in Liverpool. I don't know why. I must have been doing a gig, and I was listening to Any Answers on my radio, on my telephone. You could listen to the radio on your telephone these days, and it wasn't that long ago because he lived into his 90s, and he phoned up Any Answers to talk about, it was something to do with what the Russians were doing at sea or something, and he had experience. He was a naval officer and he knew a lot of Russians when he was serving, and he rang up to talk about that anyway. And I was like, that's Richard Beale, and he's just a caller. My name is Richard Beale from where, and you go, no, that's the Refusian voice, that's the Minister for Ecology, that's Bat Masterson. And I love the fact that he was so engaged even in later life, that apparently he used to write to his local papers and all sorts. But yeah, he used to ring up that wasn't the only time he was on, apparently. But yeah, he used to ring up Any Answers as well on Radio 4. Love that, Richard Beale, bless him. But yes, so that's the Refusians, but the Monoids, which I chose. So isn't that exciting? Oh, and Richard Beale did write a book about his time with the Navy called One Man's War. I wish he'd written a book about his acting as well. Or agreed to do a podcast, but he didn't trust the internet. But at least he wrote a book about his time at sea, and I have that called One Man's War. So if you want to know what Doctor Who actors got up to outside of Doctor Who, Richard had a book published. So I've won, so it doesn't matter what Mark chooses for thing number 5, but let's hear. And I mean, we have, he has very cleverly, Mark, used all of his choices to then sort of segue off and talk about lots of other things that could have been choices too. But that's what this is all about. The choices are really there to provoke conversation and opinion and different views. So the fact that he's used them to talk about other aspects too is great. And it seems I think, simpatico. He's brought up a lot of things that I brought up too. So I think it's very clear Mark and I are on the same wavelength, and indeed on the same wavelength of some of our correspondents who've been following along on Patreon. And it's been a joy to me that so many people who've either not thought much of this story or even not ever seen it before are discovering or being introduced to the many joys of the Ark, which is a story that I would argue a lot of people tend not to think about. And I think there's plenty to think, talk and digest about, and most importantly appreciate. And let's see what the final thing is that's going to be appreciated by Mark. And if it is the set design of Barry Newbury, then I have been pretty hot to trot. I've been fur coat, knickers, and then I've taken them off in front of it. I'm going to leave the fur coat knickers on. I'm going to leave them on. Mark.
And then for my overall idea, like my favourite thing overall about the Ark, that is William Hartnell. William Hartnell's Doctor Who. Because we know, as Doctor Who fans, that this is the era that Hartnell's Doctor is starting to be pushed out a little bit. That he's starting to, about to go into Celestial Toymaker, that he's barely in. For all sorts of reasons, and even as we keep going through it, we've had things already with things like Dialect Master Plan, him sort of disappearing halfway, through episode 11, and all sorts of stuff going on at this point, where it really feels like there's a concerted effort to reduce the amount that William Hartnell has to do, and we know that that's often for good reason, but maybe also a little bit of sidelining him because he was a bit of a pain, I guess. But what I love is that in this story, he is completely the protagonist. He is completely in charge. It's not Stephen, the space commander or whatever he is, in charge of rocket ships. He's not the one who's sent down to the planets to explore. No, it's the Doctor. He's going to go down there. I love how nonchalant he is also about the fact that when it looks like they might be stuck on that god-awful planet forever, he just sort of goes, oh, well, oh, we might be stuck here forever, Dodo. I think, oh, I'd be a bit more worried than you are, but nevertheless, it's a cliffhanger, I guess. But yes, that is the thing I love about it. He's a proper protagonist. He is our lead, and we don't get to see that much, or as much as we should, in this era. So all credit to William Hartnell. And if I were picking multiple Hartnell stories, then I might have given Michael Emerson the sort of highest accolade at this point. But for me, yeah, William Hartnell comes out at the top. He's completely confident. He gets to do his experiments. He gets to be a really big part of the action. So that is my final sort of overall choice for a favourite thing in the arc.
Good choice, Mark and Toby, in taking the regulars for granted once again, Claxon, because it is very true. And obviously I did point out a number of things along the way that I'd enjoyed about Hartnell. I love his inability to comfort Dodo and his experimenting and finding the cure with the help of his trusty monoid mate. His I haven't seen one line here. I love his chat that he has with the Refusian, and the idea, again, it's a really Doctor Who-y thing, isn't it? The Doctor sitting opposite a chair and having a really thoughtful conversation about, what it's like to be these creatures without a physical form, and the Doctor just takes it totally in his stride. And it's very true. Hartnell has been definitely sidelined in episodes of the Daleks' Master Plan, and it feels like sometimes. He is shuffled off, and he does have less to do starkly in Celestial Toymaker, but also in some of the stories he's nominally in, he gets much less of the workload, and it feels like he's being pushed out or not wanted. So it's lovely to show this late in his era that he's still got it. And he's being given plenty to do, and what he does do, he does very well, because he's the original, you might say, and he's very, very good. And it puts a lie to the fact that he couldn't be trusted with carrying the show, because he can. Much as I love Peter Purvis, who often carries it in his stead at around this time. So no, I think that's a very good choice, especially as I'd already won, Mark, so it didn't matter. But I must be mindful of not undermining the regulars. So Mark is an illustrious fellow himself, and is going to, before I say cheery bye, Mark is going to tell you all about what he's up to and where you can find him and what he's plugging.
Thank you for having me on, Toby. That was really lovely to really think about the things I love most about the Ark. Any excuse to revisit it, really. I can be found online on Twitter and Instagram at Dr. Mark Aldridge, and my website's markaldridge.info. In terms of things I'm up to at the moment, if anyone's interested, the paperback of my book telling the history of Agatha Christie's Poirot, that's the character and the series and everything you can think about it, that's just come out now from HarperCollins. So if you love your Agatha Christie, which a lot of Doctor Who fans do, I nearly picked Terror of the Vervoids actually, but if you love your Agatha Christie, you might enjoy that. So yes, anyway, thank you for having me on, Toby.
Oh, thank you, Mark. And of course, he recorded that, I think, before the invention of Blue Sky, because he's also on Blue Sky. And his book isn't just out. In fact, I think he's written another one since. I really need to catch up, because I don't know my Agatha Christie as well. I did read a load of them at school when I was at school, but it's certainly not a subject that I'm all over. And I've obviously seen a lot of the televisual ones. And I recently, we watched all the Kenneth Branagh films as well. I've seen the Ustinov ones. So yeah, when I say I'm not that experienced in Agatha Christie, I mean not as experienced as somebody who knows a lot about it, but in the same way that I say I'm not a huge Blake Seven guy. Well, except the fact I've probably done a Blake Seven marathon 4 or 5 times and could tell you the cast of every story and most of the directors and a lot of behind the scenes information. But what I mean by that is I don't know as much as I do about Doctor Who, which I've also never claimed to be an expert in. I'm just somebody who takes notice and deep dives. Anyway, let's not get into who counts as what. If you are interested in Agatha Christie, you would be foolish to go anywhere other than Mark right now, because he's hot on all things Agatha Christie, and he chose the Ark, and we were singing from the same hymn sheet. So I hope you enjoyed that. A rare taste of victory for me, and it's been really nice, actually. As I say, I've always had a soft spot for the Ark, but of course it impressed me when I first saw it. I did find it a little dull, I have to say, because I found a lot of black and white Who quite dull when I was a teenager. But now I don't find this stuff dull at all. I like the pace at which it moves. And then when it does impressive stuff outside of that too, outside of that lovely paced storytelling that I now really find very comforting and enjoyable. It just blows me away. Okay, some of the characters could have been more interesting. The Guardians could have not been dressed in swimming gear and that stuff that divides parts of butcher shops, and it could have been a little less naive in places. But I think lots of Doctor Who stories have faults, and I think those faults are less detrimental to the overall quality of the arc than other faults in some other Doctor Who stories. And what they're outweighed by, I think, is some hugely special stuff. Some of it, particular to this story, particularly the direction of Michael Imeson, who just fills it with so many moments that you just go, you didn't need to do that, and actually make the shortcomings in other areas, like say the acting, understandable, because he's made a trade-off. And Doctor Who is all about that. Where do I spend the money? Where do I put the focus? And I think he's made the right calls there, because he could have got a well-known. He could have got somebody like Patrick Wymark to play the commander, but it would have been a real waste of Patrick Wymark. And the couple of £100 that you saved, you get a nice shot of a coffin shooting off into space or whatever, or you get a painted backdrop suggesting that there are lots of those escape poddy things or whatever. So Imeson is to me the headline news, but Hartnell was a good call. Barry Newbury. I think Paul Ericsson's has a thoughtful approach to the script. I think it does lose its way a little. It becomes a little less thoughtful and ambitious. But actually, having said that, I was thinking that when I came into episodes 3 and 4, but they do still pay lip service to what the story is about, in inverted commas, even then. So it's not as stark a change as perhaps I had in my head, or maybe I was just pleasantly surprised because I was prepared for that. But I've really enjoyed celebrating the arc for you listeners, and I hope you've enjoyed partaking in that celebration. And I look forward to speaking to you next time we meet, which will be in 700 years' time. They will all be different and awful and overrun by baddies. But until then, have a marvellous time. Thanks very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock, and my special guest, Dr. Mark Aldridge, who, since he recorded his contribution, has gone on to a thing that hadn't been invented then, called Blue Sky. He's at markaldridge.info, and he's the co-host and co-producer of The Swinging Christies. So check him out and his books. He's done a Poirot and a Marple book. I'm grateful to Mark and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Ruben Herfindahl, Stephen Moffat, Peter Burns, James Correa-Smith, Peter Harness, Ronald Hayden, Rob Leonard, Christopher Meredith, Gavin McLean, Richard Straw, Neil Tate, Nick Tedston, Lisa and Andrew, Gavin McLean, Steve Manfred, David Matthewman, Jason Mayo, Rossa McPhillips, Stuart Mitchell, Nathan Moore, Ian Morgan, Matthew Newton, Graham Knott, Dave Owen, Adam Parkin, Ken Patterson, Melvin Pena, Jonathan Potter, Kevin Parker, Scott Pride, Dylan Rees, John Rivers, Jim Sangster, Keith Say, Graham Slight, David Shepherdson, Stephen, and Damien Timmer. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you would like your name read out on the credits, then go to patreon.com/Toby Haydock. That is one of the prizes. You also get advance releases, bonus material. You get stuff that is exclusive to Patreon, monthly AMAs, usually more than one a month actually, delves behind the scenes into some of the DVD and Blu-ray extras that I do, interviews from my archive, and all sorts of other stuff. And all the podcasts are released well in advance of when they appear on Apple and Spotify and all those other places. And it's a way of ensuring that I get to spend proper time making these and doing so on proper equipment and hopefully doing a professional job that sounds good. You can also support these at ko-fi.com/Toby Haydock, which is not a thing that involves monthly obligations or anything. It's just like throwing a tip into a hat, and is another way of supporting this output. But you can support this output without putting your hands in your pockets by simply giving me a bit of your time, by liking and subscribing everywhere you may find these, by telling your friends, but also by telling the whole of the internet with a 5-star rating and a few lines of review. But anything you can do to help is greatly appreciated, and listening and downloading, which you have done, is already a great help, and I'm really grateful. I'm on all the social media. I'm on Twitter at Haydock Podcasts and at Toby Haydock. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Instagram at Toby.Haydock. I've got a YouTube channel. Please thumbs up and like and subscribe to that. I'm trying to work out how to do it better, but I'm getting there. And the more traction I get on there, the more time I'll spend doing stuff properly on there. And you can also come and see me do comedy at Excess Malarkey Comedy Club. And you can support the things that I do elsewhere by listening to them and being nice about them on the internet and elsewhere. It all just helps. And now I sound like Uriah Heep and I hate myself. But you see, if I do serve you well, you've got to treat me nicely, because otherwise I'll rebel and try and kill you all, albeit rather anonymously and with terrible posture. And more hair than I've currently got. Actually, way more hair. And there we have it. Really enjoyed the response that everyone's given to the John Halstead interview. And actually, I looked up, he mentioned that Z-Cars appearance that he did. Now, there's a lot of Z-Cars missing, so I had no hope. But I actually did have a look, and the episode itself, called Inspection, Series 5, Episode 5, I think. Inspection, I backtraced it by looking at what episodes, because John's not credited on IMDb for being in it, even though he said he was, because he's not credited on screen. And it's unlike Doctor Who, people don't necessarily update extras and stuff, especially if there's not paperwork. I don't know if there is paperwork. I think there's Piers B. David Brunt told me there was Piers B. Anyway, I had a look on it, and you can see John very distinctively playing one of Bernard Archer's coterie of police officers in the episode. So that was quite nice to hear from the horse's mouth about it. I'd completely forgotten that anecdote, actually, and I certainly hadn't checked at the time. So it was great hearing that anecdote, and then, having a little bit of a check and going, oh, it exists, and look, there he is. And I should send it to him, really. I don't know if my old email address for him works, but it would be fun to send it to him, wouldn't it? And say, look, John, you can see yourself in the background. Anyway, what a character, and it was really nice to revisit that, even though it meant I had to listen to me interviewing somebody, which always makes me feel a bit sick. But he was worth it. So, hope everyone's well. And it was good old D Mark, eh? And I won. I never win. What a nice feeling for a change. Oh, and something I never mentioned during the commentary is that in episode 1, it's not the planet Refusis, although they call it Refusis later on. It's Refusis 2. And on all the write-ups, it's always said, the refusions of Refusis. But I like the fact it's Refusis 2, because I remember, when I came into the Ark to watch it as a kid, it was like, they're going to the planet Refusis. So it was odd when I heard him say, Refusis 2. And they never refer to it again, I don't think, as Refusis 2. And it's just a nice... Because why would you? Because if it's the only Refusis you're talking about, you don't need to say Refusis 2. But it's just another nice little touch, isn't it? And a nice little thing when I was coming to the episode, fresh, with what my assumed knowledge about it. It's just a little bit. It's not Refusis. It's Refusis 2. It's just a little bit of a wider world, a wider universe out there. It's just the gift that keeps on giving in little ways. That's the beautiful thing about being a Doctor Who fan, is that something like that can make you very happy. And I've no idea why, but it actually does. But can also pass without comment this time around. I didn't mention it in the commentary. And like lots of bits, actually, it was only going back to, look at that scene with the zigzag to see just how clear that visual effect was, because I hadn't mentioned it in episode 3, that I actually listened to the dialogue in that scene as well, because I wasn't having to commentate over it. There was so much there as well. There's so much I miss because I'm talking through it, which means, far from being bored or over familiar next time I come to the story, there will be loads of stuff that I haven't appreciated this time round. So I could do this again and give you totally different observations. I mean, I'm not going to. I'm not going to, but I could. I mean, I couldn't give you totally different observations for the whole 4 episodes, but there'd be a few moments. There'd be 2 moments. There'd be a Refusis 2 moments where I could give you fresh observations, I think. Yeah, I nearly committed to that, didn't I? Going, I could just do your whole 4 episodes again, and it'd be a completely different experience. And I suspect it probably wouldn't be, but there'd be the odd moment. There'd be an odd moment that I'd missed.